The bloodshed in Balochistan has once again pushed Pakistan's largest province into the global spotlight. Deadly attacks, retaliatory military operations, and fresh reports of casualties have underscored a conflict that has refused to fade despite decades of crackdowns by the Pakistani army. Even after repeated security offensives, Baloch rebel groups continue to launch attacks, insisting that their struggle is far from over. And as the violence intensifies, another date is drawing closer. We're talking about August 11th. Well, every year on August 11th, Baloch rebel groups mark what they call Balochistan's Independence Day. While Pakistan celebrates its Independence Day on August 14th, many Baloch activists argue that their homeland had already attained a separate status before Pakistan came into existence. For them, August 11th is not just a symbolic date. It signifies that Balochistan was an independent entity whose later incorporation into Pakistan remains disputed. Well, this fight for justice lies at the heart of one of South Asia's longest-running conflicts. Now, to understand why August 11th continues to resonate so deeply among Baloch rebels, it is necessary to revisit the events surrounding the partition of British India, the accession of princely state of Kalat, and the decades of unrest that followed. The story begins in the final days of British rule in the Indian subcontinent. Just 3 days before Pakistan formally came into existence, the Khanat of Kalat, the largest and most influential princely state in the present-day Balochistan, announced that it would exist as an independent state after the British departure. Well, the declaration followed negotiations between the leadership of Kalat and representatives of the soon-to-be-created Pakistan. In fact, historical accounts show that Kalat was treated differently from many other princely states because of earlier treaty arrangements with the British. Pakistan also acknowledged Kalat's distinct constitutional position during these very discussions. For Baloch rebel groups, this moment represents the birth of an independent Baloch state. In fact, they also argue that August 11, 1947 was the day Balochistan asserted its sovereignty, making it the most appropriate date to commemorate as Independence Day. Pakistan, however, does not accept this very interpretation. Pakistani historians and officials maintain that the constitutional process eventually led to Kalat's accession to Pakistan in 1948, making Balochistan an integral part of the country. Well, that is why August 11 has become a date remembered in two very different ways depending on one's historical perspective. After August 11, the Khan of Kalat sought to preserve the state's independent status. At the time, the Baloch region was not a single administrative unit. It consisted of princely states of Kalat, Makran, Kharan and Las Bela, along with British-administered territories. Over the following months, Pakistan accepted the accession of Makran, Kharan and Las Bela. Well, this left Kalat geographically isolated. In fact, negotiations between Kalat and Pakistan continued for several months but failed to produce an agreement accepted to both sides. Then came March 1948. Pakistani forces entered Kalat and shortly afterward, Khar Mir Ahmad Yar Khan signed the instrument of accession, formally bringing Kalat into Pakistan. Pakistan regards this accession as legal and constitutional. However, many Baloch rebels reject that version. They argue that the accession took place under heavy military pressure and therefore lacked genuine consent. This disagreement over the events of March 1948 remains one of the central issues driving the Baloch nationalist movement today. Well, the debate over history eventually transformed into a political movement. Soon after the session, opposition emerged from within the ruling family itself. Now, Prince Abdul Karim, the brother of the Khan of Kalat, launched an armed rebellion in 1948, beginning what many historians describe as the first Baloch insurgency. Over the decades, several waves of insurgency followed. In 1958, in 1962, 1973, and again from the early 2000s onwards. Now, for many Baloch rebels, these movements are viewed as successive attempts to reclaim what they considered a lost sovereignty. And as a result, August 11 evolved from being merely a historical date into a powerful political symbol, representing aspiration for self-determination. In fact, every year Baloch activists inside Pakistan and members of the Baloch diaspora abroad organize rallies, demonstrations and online campaign around this very date. Well, August 11 is used to draw international attention to their political demands and to reinforce the narrative that Balochistan was independent before joining Pakistan. Now, the significance of August 11 cannot be understood without examining the broader grievances that shape today's Baloch sense of nationalism. Balochistan is Pakistan's largest province by area, accounting for nearly 44% of the country's landmass. Yet it remains among its least developed regions despite possessing vast reserve of natural gas, copper, gold and other minerals. Now, many Baloch rebel groups argue that the province's natural wealth has disproportionately benefited the Pakistani government, while local communities continue to face poverty, unemployment and inadequate infrastructure. In fact, the development of the Kalat port, a flagship project under the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, has further intensified these debates. Critics argue that locals have not received proportional economic benefits, while Islamabad maintains that such projects are designed to bring long-term prosperity and development to the region. Well, these economic and political concerns have reinforced the symbolism of August 11 for many Baloch activists, who view it as a reminder of their historical claims and contemporary demands. Today, Balochistan continues to be Pakistan's one of the biggest security nightmares. Recent years have seen attacks by rebel groups targeting Pakistani security forces, infrastructure and at times Chinese interest linked to the CPEC project. In fact, Pakistan has also designated several of these organizations as terrorist groups and says its security operations are aimed at protecting civilians and maintaining national security. Alongside the armed conflict, human rights organizations and Baloch activists have repeatedly alleged enforced disappearances, arbitrary arrest and restriction on political activities. In fact, families of missing persons have organized protests demanding information about their relatives multiple times. But Pakistani authorities have denied allegations of systematic abuse, stating that security operations are conducted within the framework of the law and are necessary to combat militancy. As August 11 approaches each year, security measures across the parts of Balochistan are often intensified. Rebel groups attempt to organize rallies and display Baloch flags, while authorities frequently impose restrictions, citing concerns over public order and security. And the result is an annual cycle in which history and present-day politics converge. For Pakistan, August 11 is viewed as the part of a disputed historical narrative promoted by rebel movement. And for many Baloch fighters, however, it remains the date on which they believe their homeland first stood as an independent state. Well, that is why nearly 8 decades later, August 11 continues to be far more than a date on the calendar. It remains a powerful symbol at the center of the ongoing debate over Balochistan's history, identity and political future. Well, with that, it's a wrap on this edition of From the News Desk. Thank you so much for watching, and I'm Yash Goyal signing off for Times Now Digital. Until next time, take care and keep watching this space for more such videos.